light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I'm Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend David Slater, who is a spiritual intuitive and spiritual counselor. And depending on what circles one moves in spiritually, you sometimes run into the term Akashic records. For those who don't move in those circles, who are unfamiliar with the term, obviously we need to do a little bit of definition here. My understanding, to which you're welcome to correct or add to in any way you like, is that the Akashic records is some kind of spiritual dimension or place where everything that has ever occurred is remembered. Everything. You know, that there's absolutely nothing that has ever happened anywhere, any thought, any word, anything that is not somehow recorded and remembered there. The curious thing I've found with the various people I've talked with over the years about the Akashic records is that everyone seems to be perceiving something different, which of course has me wondering, so if we go to the library and we all check out the same book, why does everybody say that it contains different things? You know, why aren't we quoting the same text? But of course, a book is a very limited, defined, more or less one-dimensional thing. Yet it has pages, it has a certain number of pages, each page has certain text on it, and these very literal descriptions may not apply to the Akashic records. I don't know if the human mind is able to comprehend something or some way that everything can be remembered.
My experience with the Akashic records, and I agree with you, and there are a number of folks, and I would tend to agree that not only what has passed is recorded, but also what is going to happen. That tends to be much more of a variable, because as we choose and as possibilities increase in this moment, what the future looks like is such a fluid and such a very liquid concept.
So your perception of future Akashic records is that, to use the metaphor, I guess, the text on the pages is literally changing as things continue to unfold.
Mm-hmm. As we choose the things we choose. Here's how I use Akashic records as a concept for myself. What I find as being an intuitive, I can access information, the unseen, the unwritten information, a number of different ways. Someone who's passed can come and I can see something in the form of a medium. I can see the person for who they are, and this is a direct look into someone, and sometimes who they will be. I can access Akashic records when a perception of the past is affecting their now.
Okay.
And where that comes...
It's the relationship that brings it into view?
Yes. For instance, repressed memory can be aided, and that gets a little interesting, but more so, someone will say, I experienced something at 12, and I'm not clear as to what my dead aunt felt in that. And so I have two choices. I can speak to the dead aunt, or I can speak to what happened, and
the Akashic records.
The Akashic records. And it's merely a route to access a perception of the past.
Does that mean that that information is invisible to you until the question is asked?
Well, I wouldn't know to ask the question unless it's been brought to me.
So there's a lot of things that are in the Akashic records that no one knows to look for.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And so, but with that, Akashic records, it's as if you're looking at a diamond with 1,000 facets to it for any one moment you may be looking at. It has just as many perceptions as the now has. So your perception of what happened to you on May 12th when you were 12 years old is very real to you.
Mm-hmm.
And someone who was 5 feet away from you at the same memory you have is vastly different. And their view of the Akashic records, or that history, is just as varied as in this moment, when in front of him behind the camera are two vastly different perceptions.
Mm-hmm. So, if you were going to define the totality of the Akashic records, it is a diamond with a billion facets, each one of which is a diamond with a billion facets.
Uh-huh. Here's where it comes in handy. Say, for instance, and again, I'm just coming up with something. You're 12 years old, May 12th or March 12th, whatever
Mm-hmm.
date, and you're
Different day in
interacting.
your life.
Yeah, and you're interacting with another human being. This person is now passed, and you feel as if in that moment you hurt their feelings or you filled them with pride, but you're not sure, and you would like to revisit that. And you
Because somehow that certainty would be empowering to you.
Yes. And so you can go back
So you're
to that.
reaching for certainty.
Right. And you can use both at the same time, speak to the person and speak to the records themselves to clarify. And again, it's still perception.
Is certainty a legitimate goal?
Certainty. How you perceive any one thing is what's important. Life in and of itself are not the circumstances. It's your perception of the circumstances.
So if by certainty one means I want to know objectively what happened,
Mm-hmm.
that's an entirely different question as asking, I want to know what happened that is relevant to me.
Well, here's where it can get
Is that
fun.
a good way of rephrasing it?
Well, yes, but going there, I have a responsibility as an intuitive at this point. I can say, oh no, it was all wonderful and this dead person is very happy with you and rainbows and unicorns, go forth and prosper.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also say, no, actually, her feelings were tremendously hurt. But what it caused in her was a way to change how she perceived life.
Okay.
And that weeks later, months later, it was the most dramatically wonderful point in her life because her feelings were hurt. And again, I'm not, my goal isn't rainbows and unicorns. Reality of the
life is, life and reality is a complex interaction of more variables than anyone can count, which is where I love Scott Peck's word in the book In Search of Stones, overdetermined.
Yes.
That the effect is overdetermined. It has so many causes that you cannot legitimately say which one is to blame.
Exactly. And anytime you look for blame, you'll find it. Stop looking for blame and get to the reality or the meat of the matter is so much more helpful.
But yeah, to me, blame is a waste of time because
Yes.
it doesn't empower you in any way.
Yes, absolutely. So, Akashic records, certainty is not part of Akashic records. But
So when someone says, I'm channeling the Akashic records, they're really not saying anything more grandiose than saying, I read the Encyclopedia Britannica in the local library.
yes, although that one I would rely on a little bit more than when someone says they're channeling Akashic records. Basically,
Why do you consider the Encyclopedia more reliable than the Akashic records?
with an intuitive...
Or is it not the record that's the problem?
A lot of folks don't understand the responsibility they have as an intuitive.
Okay.
If you ask me to look into your past, okay, the past you experienced, again, if I...
You will see it through the lens of your own experience.
Yes, and oftentimes I'll be able to give enough information to whether you're like, wow, that's scary because, okay, you weren't there and you're speaking...
How could you know these things?
Yeah, how could you know these things? But again, being able to remove judgment, especially as an intuitive, and this is, I have enough people coming to me these days that yesterday had believed that they had no intuition at all, and today they're seeing dead people, and it's frightening to them. And one of the first things I try to point out,
because they don't know what to do with it, or because they're not sure of the significance, or why would it be frightening?
Oh, any level of things. Am I demon possessed? The church says it's bad. My uncle says I'm a loony bin. The list can be long, but it is a dramatic, it's almost as if your eyeballs all of a sudden got a bifocal to them. It would throw you off. Your perceptions would be, and granted, bifocal would be far less dramatic, but the interesting concept to it is, in an intuitive point of view, or a beyond the five senses view, whatever that, however it manifests itself, to be able to remove judgment from it and say, oh, this is only a view, this is only a picture I'm seeing, is far more helpful than to say, well, I accessed the Akashic records and, you know, this thing in history did not happen. Okay, great. If that helps someone, wonderful. But for the most part, helping someone with yet another perspective of their own history can be very helpful. And again, it isn't always shiny. It isn't always rainbows and unicorns.
And yet there needs to be accountability and also the ability to question. I'm concerned that in some cases I've met people who say, I'm channeling the Akashic records, and what they really mean is, you are not allowed to question me. Polite conversation won't allow me to tell you what Sister Who's response to that would be. To me, whether it's not a question of who says it or what the source is,
yes,
every statement should be able to stand on its own and should be open to cross-examination, to questioning, to disagreement. Because ultimately the truth of anything, or any part of anything, is much more complex. And the closer you look, the more complexity you see. You know, the table looks very simple until you put it under an electron microscope.
Yes. And again, perception and sharing of perception, if we can remove our ego from it, let me back off from that, because we'll always have an ego. It's an identity. If we don't have to be right, but merely sharing a perspective, telling a tale, even allowing for our own skepticism along with others. Let me give you a prime example, and this person said I could share this many years ago. It was a reading I did for someone, and it was over the phone, and the person who came in, a person from their past, announced themselves so clearly. Sometimes there's a little bit of warming up to the spiritual, the person in the spirit realm, to fully understand what they're saying. She came across and she said, I'm great Aunt Emma and I've got something for her. And I'm like, well, fantastic. And so I tell her, your great Aunt Emma is coming through, and her response was, well, I don't have a great Aunt Emma. And I'm like, well, okay. She's introducing herself as great Aunt Emma and she has a message for you. And she says, okay, but I don't have a great, and I said, okay, her name and relation are not important. She has a message. Do you want to hear it? And I didn't take it as a challenge by any means. I could be wrong, and I always allow for myself to be wrong. Anyway, she said yes. I gave her the message, and she said, wow, that's everything I needed to hear. This was really remarkable, so helpful. But I don't have a great Aunt Emma. And I said, call her Cousin Fred, I don't care. What?
And the name of your guardian angel is Aunt Emma.
Yes, exactly. What was interesting was about 4 or 5 days later, I received an email from this person, and attached was a picture, and she spoke to her aunt who does the genealogy of the family, and attached was the picture of her great Aunt Emma that she didn't know she had. And what was delightful is the validation wasn't important any more than the disagreement to it. A
Because it
message
was peripheral to the message.
exactly. They could come through and say, "I'm Bozo the Clown." It does not matter.
It's not about whether it's historically correct or
Yes.
not, but how the information is or is not empowering.
Yes.
And I think some people, because imagination has been abused and used for manipulation and deceit, there are some people who would go too far and not want to be open to it at all. But there's a lot of magnificent benefit that can come from still allowing the tool of imagination to be used constructively.
Absolutely.
You know, whether it's a guided visualization, or imagine if you were, or imagine if George Washington were your grandfather, what would you say to him, you know, on Thanksgiving Day?
Yeah.
Imagine conversations that may ultimately prove incredibly empowering.
And this is what's so important, is by expanding all the possibilities, it makes life so much more engaging and much more expansive. And will speak to a client, and while I'm telling them, I'll say, okay, I may access this information or that information, and sometimes I'm just full of beans. That's a possibility because I'm human. And they'll look at me because I'm not trying to convince them, or and it makes the message more fun, to be honest with you. When you go to someone and they're accessing the spirit realm, it's not a booming voice from God. It is merely a perspective and a possibility.
It might be, but frequently it's not.
Yes, exactly.
You know, the divine can manifest in whatever way the divine wants to. Who am I to say? But a thought that came to mind a little while ago, though, as we're describing different sorts of things, is to remember that the Akashic records, like God, like every other sacred text to which one wishes to point, they're not candy machines.
No.
It's not put a quarter in and the candy comes out. It's not repeat these words, spin around 3 times, tap your heels together 3 times, whatever. There's no recipe. It's a relationship with something that is inherently, inescapably greater than humanity. And what we seek from it is not the ability to manipulate,
right,
but the ability to grow.
Well, and so many times, and again, when Akashic records come up intuitively, is I try to let folks know you can't change your past, but you can change the perception, your perception of it.
And thereby you can change the influence of the past.
Yes, exactly. And give a personal example. In my past, I've been abused, and that's not unusual in the human experience. And I could play the victim, and I could do all kinds of wonderful things
be nice
from
to
that.
me because I've had a harder life than everybody else.
Exactly.
We're not in competition here.
Well, here's the thing: is for me, it ultimately comes down to whether I'm choosing fear or I'm choosing love. And my perception of a particular person in my past is they showed me what love is not. Now, here's an important thing. Love is so infinite that it's impossible to say what love is. But when something is that variable, it's easier to describe it as what it is not rather than what it is. So,
Quite possibly.
my past has now explained to me pretty extensively what love is not. I'm like, oh, so I don't need to choose that. I already know what's there, and that's not love, and I know this is.
So, additionally, I'm guessing there will be other experiences in the future that will tell you other things that love is not.
Yes.
And hopefully also experiences at various points that will teach you what real love is.
But I took the view from my past of me being wronged and victimized to, if you will, a lifetime classroom setting and say, oh, love and love not. And this one hasn't helped me so much. And I don't even have enough time in this lifetime to experience all of this, but I'm really liking it. And
the other thing to bear in mind, though, I think, when we have these experiences of what love is not, metaphorically think of it as a razor or a scraping stone that takes all the superficiality off and lets you see what's really underneath.
Yes.
The things that the negative makes visible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the very meaning of the word negative,
Mm-hmm.
to negate, to in my high school and junior high school math classes, the negative numbers would take something away from the positive, and then you'd find out you had to find out for the math assignment what's left.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the negative becomes positive. The negative is negative. It will always be what it is. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something afterwards that you wouldn't have noticed before.
But the important thing in a mathematical equation is you end up with a value.
Mm-hmm.
A value. To remove our judgments from anything. And it is a challenge, but at the same time, it's remarkable to experience a day, if nothing else, when nothing scares us, when nothing offends us, because it merely is what it is. It's neither good nor bad, but it is what it is. And it gives a perspective that is so expansive.
I'll have to beg for the right to be less spiritually mature than you on this one.
You have
I will always
it.
be offended by certain things.
The thing is you have achieved a non-judgment in conversations we've had. You've spoken.
But I will always be offended by someone lying to me.
Okay.
I will always be offended by someone hurting someone else for selfish reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Even granting that, though, that's my humanity remaining present. From some higher perspective, if you will, perhaps the perspective of the Akashic records, to be able to simply say, it is what it is, what happened, happened. At some point, in order to be fully human and fully healed, it has to, I don't mean sink, but it has to relax to being just history, not emotional influence.
To go back to the mathematical analogy, it's important that what we end up with is a value.
Yeah, as you were saying that before, the thought popped into my head that within a mathematical universe,
Uh-huh.
it is impossible, categorically impossible, in every equation to wind up with nothing.
Correct.
There is no nothing within a mathematical universe.
And in judgment, we try to take value out of many things.
Yeah.
So
And even zero or a negative number is still a value.
yes, it has its place, it has its meaning, it has its reference to everything else, to all of eternity.
As we're winding up this discussion, then, I guess when people say I channel the Akashic records or I'm an intuitive clairvoyant or what have you, to basically acknowledge that calmly and say, okay, you have access to certain information. If you can interpret it for me in a way that is empowering, I am thankful. But I will expect you to be open to disagreement, to be open to being questioned, to allow me to encourage you to refine your skills further by expressing when I notice something awkward about the way you spoke or described it or presented it to me.
It's no different than someone saying, I'm going to relay the news to you that I heard from the television, but tomorrow I'll relay the news to you that I heard from the radio.
Or I'll relate tomorrow's television news to you.
Exactly. Lots of variables involved. If the person you're speaking to cannot be wrong, you have an inherent flaw with a conversation to begin with.
Cannot be wrong within their own mind.
Yes, or in what they're speaking.
Yeah. I mean, certainly they could be wrong.
Yes.
But if they believe they could not be, and you're not allowed to question, and they're refusing to be held accountable to somebody else's perception of the record.
Our best teachers in life told us, I could be wrong, but here's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And these are well-certified teachers.
Well, and ultimately, all each of us has is a perception.
Exactly.
You know, and it's up to each individual to connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone can help me connect the dots, that's very good. But I don't think it should ever be interpreted in terms of hierarchical relationship.
Right.
You know, because I read the Encyclopedia Britannica and you didn't, doesn't mean I'm better than you.
Exactly.
It just means I'm one more reader in the world.
And I had an afternoon to kill.
Well, if you read the whole thing. In any case, thank you very much for everything you shared today. I hope
definitely.
we've given people good things to think about and ways to be open to wisdom and insight, regardless of what channel it comes through.
Exactly.
You know, consider it. Feel free to question it. Feel free to put it to the test.
Indeed.
Thank you.